you are a proud trans woman. I've produced you
Well, I
on...
wouldn't say proud trans woman. I'm just a woman. But everyone introduces me as... It's interesting, when I go on these types of shows, nobody else gets a prefix. We don't say we're now going to gay Sam Dowler, sorry, or we're going to gay Christo, but I get a prefix. But
Well, in fairness, it's a debate about trans women, and in order to show that you understand what it is like to be trans, that's the reason that I do that. If I were to meet you on a night out, I wouldn't say to a friend, oh, this is my trans female friend India. I'd say, this is my friend India. But in the purposes of a debate about a trans woman competing in the Olympics, that's the reason why I refer to you as a woman who has transitioned. So that's the reason why, India. But getting on to the debate, do you think that this now proves that there was a lot of fuss about this that was really over nothing, the fact that Laurel Hubbard didn't do particularly well?
Well, my view is that she should never have taken up this challenge and pursued this goal of actually competing in the Olympics, because whichever way you cut it, Christo, she was doomed to fail. If she had won, all the critics would have came out and said, this is appalling, it's cheating, all the usual stuff that you hear. And now that she's lost, I'm sure there will be all sorts of conspiracy theories saying that she threw the competition, she could have won, but she saw the reaction on social media and she just deliberately threw it. And I just think it's something that she shouldn't have pursued. I don't think it's good, and I think it's something that, in her situation, given the fact that she's had a male puberty, she's gone through all that, she lifted weights in the first part of her life, so obviously she develops memory muscle, she has longer limbs generally, better twitch fibers. The twitch fibers in the sporting context allow you to do explosive actions, so actually lifting the weights. People watching will have said, look at that jerk. And they won't be talking about the jerk in the terms of actually the movement of lifting the bar. They'll have been talking about Laurel. And I just think it's something that ultimately only invites criticism. My God, we have enough negativity about trans people and misunderstanding at the moment, perpetuated by the media.
Sam Dowler, I mean, you are a gay man, and you are an activist around LGBT rights. What's wrong with what India's had to say there? There is a danger, isn't there, that this actually might create more intolerance towards people who've transitioned?
Well, hi, Christo. Hi, India. I know you both personally anyway. I think...
I love you, Sam. I think you're great.
I love you too, honey. Obviously, I do disagree with India, because at the end of the day, saying that someone shouldn't have even done it to begin with, like you're saying, oh well, don't try that, don't try and push any boundaries because you're only going to fail. That's cutting yourself off straight away. And look, Laurel hasn't tried to be in the media at all. She's just doing her own thing. She wants to stay away from negativity. She stayed away from all social media. She said it to do with the Olympics. She's just doing her own thing. Yes, she won some golds, but she wasn't even one of the favourites to come into this competition. And now, obviously, she's crashed and burned out of it anyway. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. She had injuries, but I don't think you can say, especially you, India, you can't say, well, don't try and do something. As you say, like, you don't like to be introduced as a trans person, just like in a situation like this. You're saying here, like, because she's trans, she can't even compete or shouldn't even try, which I don't think is fair.
But I think the difference there is, Sam, that no matter first of all, let's just look at her age. She's 42 years old. Most of her competitors are 20. Now, a natural-born woman in her 40s would not be in the Olympics. It simply wouldn't be the case. So just by virtue of looking at Laurel's age, you see that she has biological.
That's her decision, surely. And
no, but it's not. It's but Sam, it is a competition, and for a competition to be fair, it needs to be a level playing field. And if her age, if it is demonstrated what could be perceived to be an unfair advantage by the fact that she is older than other women who would be able to compete. As India also pointed out, she went through a male puberty, which would give her increased muscle mass, increased height, different bone density, increased lung capacity. None of those things by taking the hormone suppressants or anything to get rid of the levels of testosterone that would make her qualify for the competition. None of that would change as a result of her doing that. So doesn't it make it a valid concern that she's got an unfair advantage over other women?
But also, she's within the boundaries of the IOC already. They have said that it is, that it's fine.
Yeah, of testosterone levels.
Yeah, and exactly. But like, she hasn't. It's not like she's storming to gold and like I'm making a fool of everybody else or making a fool of the competition. Like all she is asking to do is have the ability to be able to compete, and she's had that, and unfortunately she crashed out. That's a shame. And whether it's to do with her age or the fact that she isn't strong enough compared to, like, surely as well, like, to be beat if you're like, if you were born a woman like these 20-year-olds are, like, you welcome the competition. She's not like some superhuman that's managing to smash them all to bits, and that hasn't happened. So why not let her compete? But she's allowed to compete. The IOC says she's allowed to compete. So who are we to say no, she mustn't?
Well, she was allowed to qualify though, and that meant that she beat other women who were unable to qualify. Therefore, and again, I think this is a legitimate point to make, there is a criticism that she could have taken a place that someone who was born a woman might have been able to take instead. What would you say to that?
I think, well, the case in point here is that obviously this is a case-by-case basis, and like her case has been, is wildly overblown in the media, but the IOC stated that it was okay, so therefore, those are the rules of the Olympics. Okay,
India, the IOC, she was in the rules of the Olympics. What do you say to that, India?
Well, very quickly, taking hormones and etc. absolutely does diminish your strength. You lose your muscle mass. So that does come round, and that plays into what Sam's saying there quite correctly, that she falls into the parameters of strength-wise. What I'm talking about is generally, and it's not guaranteed, because obviously you do get very big women, her limb lengths could be greater, and she has advantages that way. But on the argument that she's taking another woman's place, she is a woman. I'm not saying she isn't. She's absolutely a woman, and I'm sure there'll be Neanderthals out there now banging away at their keyboards or on their phones going, she's a man. What absolute tosh. My argument isn't that. I just think the fact that she's been through a male puberty, she's at the age that she is, she should have looked to it, employed a little bit of common sense, and thought about the inevitable backlash for trans people generally and how it was going to be spun PR-wise, and thought, you know what, I've had a good life.
But in India, is that the reason that you think she shouldn't have competed, the backlash, or because you believe she has an unfair advantage, or both?
Both elements. But again, just on this front, we have to accommodate. We are human beings, and we are women. So we're not like a subspecies of human being as we're sometimes portrayed in the general media. So you have to accommodate trans people some way. You can't say have trans Olympics really either, because there aren't enough. Are you
saying she shouldn't have bothered and just give up?
We are 0.5% of the population, yet what you read and you hear on the airwaves, you would think we were some sort of plague that was incoming. 0.5% of the population.
Okay, listen, Sam, I'm going to let you respond to that. We'll come back to you both. India, you just raised a really interesting point, and I've had a lot of people make this point this afternoon, that perhaps there should be a separate category for those people that have transitioned when it comes to sporting events, and you would be against that, presumably.
Of course, we're not. It's not a disability, and we're not a subset of human beings. We're men and women, wherever people out there think that's
but
what we are.
But if you think that she shouldn't have competed, but you also don't think that there should be a separate category, what is the solution to this problem?
Well, the solution is, but this is part of the wider thing about trans people, and why, you only ever see the likes of me when I'm in the dock defending trans people. We're not part of society generally. The answer to the question is, it all hinges on male puberty. So what you do is, the trans kids, you allow them to transition. They don't go through the male puberty, then they can compete, as they're going to do in the future, where anyone thinks, and the resistance at the moment, that is absolutely what's going to happen in the future. But if you've gone through a male puberty, then you don't compete. But you can't win, because people will then say, well, hold on a sec, we're not allowing trans people to transition early on. They must go through this
but
puberty.
There's also respect.
Though I don't know the person involved, I'm insisting that person goes through that puberty. I don't know them, but they must go through it. And then when they come out the other end of the puberty and say, I never wanted that.
And I absolutely get that, India, and I get there is a lot of hysteria around this debate. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that people, trot their children down to the gender clinic and they are transitioning immediately, rather than the long and time-consuming process. And there's a lot of psychological counselling and the like that takes place. I think there are some misconceptions out there. I don't disagree with you, but you must also accept that some people identify as trans who haven't been through transitional surgery as well, and that they have the right, if we are to believe what we read and what activists say about this, they have the right to identify as trans without having gone through the transitional surgery. So therefore your solution wouldn't actually apply to everyone. I mean, is that right, Sam?
Well, this is the thing. So what India is saying, that because Laurel had been through puberty, you're kind of saying that then negates her ability to compete in anything. I know obviously this is, it's to do with strength, this sport, but then that has a sort of, surely that's across the board then. So, to trans women in beauty pageants, that's not fair either. There must be some sort of reason, to be against that, etc. I think you have to obviously take things on a case-by-case basis, but at the same time, you can't say to Laurel, oh, sorry, well, you're not allowed to, that's it, because that's not fair, because that's what she wanted to do
but
before.
It's also not fair that I mean, isn't the
show me how it's not fair. Show me how Laurel competing hasn't been fair, because at the moment I can't see one single reason.
Well, as India pointed out, the fact that she went through male puberty, the fact that it's a fact to say that you don't see many trans men competing in weightlifting or other events where they are up against other people who are born as men, biological men.
Trans men can be super muscly and super strong as well.
Yes, but why aren't we seeing them qualifying for the Olympics then, Sam?
Because maybe there hasn't been any that wanted to. But you saying if they did want to, if you have to be a pioneer, Laurel is saying that she doesn't want to be a pioneer. She just wants to do the sport that she's trained to do.
Her age,
and wants to carry on doing it. You can't tell somebody that they're not allowed to. And the IOC says they are allowed.
Well, the IOC are reviewing the rules, Sam.
Yeah, fair enough. But it's a moot point at the moment because A, the IOC said it was fine, and B, she didn't even win anyway.
Is this a transphobic debate, do you believe? Is asking these questions transphobic?
It absolutely is. And just to pick up on, I think Sam's, although we're supposedly on different sides here, I think Sam's making a lot of great points. And if you actually go back to the 70s, there was a tennis player called Renee Richards. Look her up. She transitioned, became a woman. She entered the women's circuit. She'd been a professional as a guy. She went nowhere. Martina Navratilova, all the top players, Billie Jean King, they were beating her. She became nothing. So this argument that it's an automatic given that because you're trans and you enter a sport that you're going to win is absolutely...
No, but you are going to qualify over other women who were not born
You're saying that they have. You're saying that it's not down to skill. It's just to do with so you can get.
No, I'm saying it could partly be down to both.
So any old muscly person could go in there and qualify for the weightlifting Olympics.
Well, in their 40s, I think that's quite unlikely.
Skill. I think what this all boils down to is the whole ridiculous thing that's going on in America with trans kids in sports, where it's all to do with politics. It's all to do with basically keeping the trans community down and basically vilifying them for political gain, and that's exactly the same thing. No,
I think that is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. The reason I think it's a ridiculous thing to say is, and actually partly because of some of the points, India, that you've made today, and I find it staggering that you now think that this is a transphobic debate when it was your point that she went through a male puberty, your point that she's in her 40s, and your point that she will have muscle memory that some of the born biological females in the competition wouldn't have. So how could it possibly be transphobic to make those points? They're your points.
Because we're jumping around here, we're talking about different things. We're talking about whether she should actually have entered the Olympics at her age, given the fact that she'd been through a male puberty and competed, and the fact of generally whether trans are a threat to women's rights. What do you mean by that? You know, I'm a woman, legally, anatomically, biologically, chemistry. I have more estrogen in my body than a natural.
But did you go through a male puberty?
But you're talking about it in the context of there are men, there are women, and then there are trans, as if there's a third species going on along here. So that's why my conversation to you might seem a little conflated. It's because the issues are being conflated. If we're talking in a sporting contest, she shouldn't have gone in the Olympics. I think it's good. At this point in time, given her age, given everything that she's been through and how she'd competed before, I think it was a no-win situation, because whether she won, nobody would cheer. If the stadium was full, thank God for COVID that it was an empty stadium. If she'd have won, it would have been filled with boos and shouts of cheats. If she's lost now, you can bet
I wouldn't agree with that in the slightest. And I feel that there is and I made this point at the top of the show, I feel if you're having this debate and you misgender her and you deliberately call her a man and all these things, I think that's absolutely abhorrent. Yeah. And it shows that you're not having this debate in good faith. But I think that the points you've raised about the fact that she went through a male puberty and the age she would be when she's competing are absolutely valid and aren't transphobic to make those points.
No, that point isn't transphobic.
Well, then why is this debate transphobic then?
Because I've just explained. Because you're talking about a group of, you have men, women, and then trans as a separate category.
Well, that's not my point. That was someone that got in touch made that point. But go on.
That's the sort of thing that went on in 1930s and 1940s Germany. We're just men and women.
But if a woman has worked to get to the point where she is able to compete in the Olympics, and then someone who was born a biological man, who, as you have pointed out, has gone through a male puberty, has the advantages of having done that, that is a threat to the fairness of women in that competition. And that is why people talk about it being a threat to women's rights. Now, does that mean that per se all trans women are threatening women's rights? No, but in that category, it's a fair question to ask, surely.
You see, you've just done it there, Chris. I like you, Chris. I'm a massive fan.
No, I'm a fan of yours, India. You know I am.
And I know you get this subject, but you just did it in that conversation there. You blended into something else. You talked about the context of sport and whether this person should have entered having gone through a male puberty. I've said, no, she shouldn't. But then the conversation moved on and people say that she's a threat to women's rights. Well, hold on a sec. Laurel is a woman. So how is she a threat to women's rights?
To those women who have been born biological women who have worked to get there, that surely is a valid point to make, isn't it? Because that is how she is different to a person who was born a biological woman. The reasons you outlined is why she is different.
Yes, and I'm agreeing on that. If you've gone through a male puberty...
So that is a threat to what they have worked for, because it isn't then seen as fair. Does that mean, again, let me stress the point, does that mean I think that all trans women are a threat to all women, full stop, per se, that's it? Of course not. But in that context, it's a threat to the fairness of the competition.
Yeah, but I would make the point, and I say this, you know, wholeheartedly and genuinely, Krista, I do like you, and I know you understand the issues at the root of this. I think when you start using language saying trans people are a threat in whatever context to women, then you are treading into transphobic waters. I'm agreeing with you that she shouldn't have competed in the Olympics, in my opinion. Others will disagree. But when you start using language saying trans people are a threat, that is transphobic.
So what would be more appropriate language to use? It would be, perhaps, does it undermine the fairness of the competition? Would that be a more appropriate way of saying it?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, because I don't want to use transphobic language. I want to have this debate in a respectful way, and I feel that if we don't have it in a respectful way, it does get shouted down as being transphobic. Sam, I'll give you the final word. What would you like to say, just briefly, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, I think a lot of what India says comes down to empathy, really, for Laurel, because at the end of the day, like, you know, you don't want to be in, you know, when you're saying like she loses either way, you are saying it, I think, feeling for Laurel, as in, like, you know, getting booed, getting all this criticism. I think a lot of what you're saying is like, ugh, why bother? Why bother when you're just gonna get criticism from all sides for doing it? I think with Laurel, it is her decision. The IOC said it was okay, and I think, like, you know, you've got to let her feel her oats. You know, you've got to let her, you know, compete if she wants to compete, and she's allowed to. And it didn't go well for her this time, but at the same time, like, it's such a broad thing with sport, and like each time it can't be like, oh, you know, she went through puberty, so therefore she can't play women's tennis, etc., like you said. So I think it is, you know, as you say, India, like, it would have been terrible for her to get booed, but at the same time, you know, and she doesn't want to be this trailblazer either. So I think also that it's a moot point, because, you know, she crashed and burned, and the IOC said it was okay anyway. All
right. Really good to talk to both of you. Really enjoyed having this conversation. India Willoughby, broadcaster and journalist. Sam Dowler, journalist, LGBT activist. Thanks